Drugs sell themselves. I'm making close to $1,000 as a 13-year-old every week. This life was so much fun. But then, I wanted to make even more money. I could make $5,000 in 10 minutes, stealing cars. I'll never forget the very first car that I stole. Crank it up, but I was gone with the wind.
A lot of guys started to gravitate toward him. Marcus never showed fear.
After a couple of months, I'm up to stealing 1 or 2 cars every week.
I saw a change in him.
Marcus felt like he needed protection.
Are they getting ready to kill me? We're running around, jumping over fences and jumping over trash cans and darting in between buildings.
You see things like this on television. You don't think that that would happen to your child.
They jump out of the car, slam me on the ground, and that's when I knew it was over. My name is Marcus Bullock. When I was a teenager, I was a good student. I went to church regularly. I was a great athlete with aspirations of playing in the NBA. That all came to a screeching halt when I was convicted of carjacking and facing life in prison at 15 years old because I was labeled a super predator. I was born in Hyattsville, Maryland, right outside of the Washington, D.C. area. When I was 2, my father left. I lived with just my mother and my sister.
I am 3 years older than Marcus. Growing up, I probably wasn't the best example for Marcus. I was very much rebellious.
We were horrible, horrible children at the time. But Melanie, she was my role model.
Marcus followed me around a lot. We would do things like break into the pool at night, taking our mom's car.
We literally took the mechanics of what we learned from playing video games and took that and applied that to the steering wheel.
My mom, because she wasn't around much, she didn't know a lot of the things that we were doing.
I'm blessed that Melanie and Marcus, they were very close. But as a single mom, the rebellion was a tremendous challenge.
My mom was an incredible woman. While she worked at the Food and Drug Administration and not really making much money, she also started to go back to college.
Everything that I did was to be a real example for them. I wanted them to see what they needed to grow into being, and that education is key. I moved into this apartment. The children didn't have far to go to catch the bus. My aunt, she lived in the same complex. I lived on one end and she lived on another. I felt like I was moving into a really nice apartment, but 2 or 3 blocks away, there were people engaged in selling drugs and following a path that I did not want them to take.
DC in the 80s, DC in the early 90s, that was when drug lords were taking and sweeping neighborhoods. Every time you turned on the news, there was a different murder that was being committed.
1989 is well on its way to becoming the deadliest on record in Washington. 90 people murdered in the first 2 months.
Walker Mill, Maryland emulated some of the craziness that you would see in one of the worst neighborhoods in the Washington metropolitan area. I saw people walking around with guns in their pants, just casually. I saw drugs being trafficked in the middle of the street.
Because I knew about the threats in the community, and with Melody and Marcus, just beginning to really just be rebellious, if you will. I sought to raise my children in the church.
My mom made sure that we stayed at church, participated in kids' choir, Bible study, prayer service, anything that was going on at the church, we were there.
School during the day and church in the evening.
I made most of my friends in church. In elementary school and middle school, my life was about basketball and oratorical contests. My mom had a very interesting rule in our home. She would not spend more than $50 for a pair of tennis shoes. Now, growing up in an era of Air Jordans, like that was impossible. I had an incredible idea. I realized that I could go to the grocery store and buy a bag of blow pops and annihilators to take them on the school bus to sell to kids for 25 cents a piece and make my own cash. The first day, before we even got off the bus, I had already run out of all of my candy.
He was always good with numbers. I think he chose the blow pops because there were so many in the pack where he could really actually make some money.
When my mom saw me with a jar filled up with quarters and dollar bills, she knew that I had this entrepreneur bug that had bitten me, and she was excited to be able to support that. I eventually became the popular kid in school. I'm the candy man. I played basketball. I was an honor student, and I had my Jordans. Things were going great. One night, I had a full suit on because we came home from a church event, and my sister asked me to walk to my aunt's house to go borrow her iron. So we were just a few buildings apart from one another. My aunt gives me the iron. She's like, oh, make sure you walk home safely. I'm walking home with my iron in my hand. I say what's up to all the fellas on the street corner. Get it far enough away where no one can see me, and I see a car approaching. They wanted to get my attention. One of the men asked me if I knew where Candy lived. I know all of the girls in the neighborhood, and there's no girl in my neighborhood named Candy. But I'm like, well, what buildings does she live in? And he tells me she lives in building 1956. And I turn around, I'm like, oh wait, there's 1956 right here. When I turn back around, there was a gun in my face. He tells me not to scream. Heart dropped, holy crap. Are they getting ready to kill me? They push me in the backseat of the car, and then they pull off. I knew that my life was over. They were asking me, where's the money? Where's the safe? Where's the drugs? And I'm looking at them like, wait a minute, I don't have any money, I don't have any safe, I don't got none of this. At 10:30 at night, in the neighborhood where I grew up in, if you were outside walking, you were probably one of the guys who had some crack in your palm. You were probably one of the guys who had a safe at your home that was filled with money. These men probably thought that I was one of those people. And they're telling me, well, take us back to your house. And I'm like, well, clearly I'm not gonna take you back to my house because that's where my mother and my sister live. So I told them no. And we're driving around now for hours while I'm sitting in the back seat wondering what is getting ready to happen to my life.
I called my aunt and I'm like, is Marcus there? And she was surprised that he wasn't with me. Where is he? We were wondering what was going on. Where could Marcus be?
Eventually, he points the gun at my head. He says, if we let you go, you've never seen us before, right? I'm like, dude, if you let me go, I will never, ever, ever, ever call the police. You don't have to worry about it. I don't even know what you look like. I'm good. The guy stops the car and said, get out. I jump out, crying with every tear inside of me, sprinting home, still in dress shoes in a suit that I had on from church, with an iron still in my hand, wondering what in the world just happened.
When Marcus came home, his clothes were drenched, he was crying, he had been running. I've never seen Marcus respond that way. We knew that something had happened to him.
I begin to tell him what happened.
I'm in shock and disbelief that something like this could have actually happened. You see things like this on television. You don't think that that would happen to your child. I can't begin to imagine all the things that were running through his mind. I think that, that was a changing point in his life.
After that incident, Marcus felt like he needed protection.
At 13 years old, I made a promise to myself that I would never, ever get caught without a gun ever again. Hey, I want to learn how to steal a car.
I felt like it was my duty to show him the ropes a little bit.
There's a gun in our pocket. We see a man sleeping in his car. Boom, let's do it. After the kidnapping, things began to change very swiftly. I knew that I had to protect myself. I bought a gun from one of the guys who hung out on the street corners. Every day when I walked out of my house, I grabbed my keys and a gun. Every day when I went to sleep at night, I made sure to put my gun back underneath my mattress so that my mom couldn't find it. I was now a part of a different kind of community.
I saw a change in him. He became angry, snappy, on edge.
I watched him change. Marcus would hang with older guys doing the same things as they were.
There was one guy, Big Mike. He had this pit bull. The pit bull was an animal that signaled that you were the man. I love that. I love the masculinity. I love the power every time he walked through the neighborhood. I wanted to be like Big Mike. One day, Big Mike and I were on a corner. He's twisting up a Philly blunt, and he started talking about selling crack. I asked him, how do you do it? He's like, drugs sell themselves. You literally just stand outside on a corner and wait for someone to approach you. He says, these little small rocks, they were only $5, $10, $20 a piece. I knew that if I could turn candy into $30, $40, $50, I could take these little small rocks and now I could make 10 times that amount. We're smoking this blunt and I'm getting high as a kite. My 13-year-old brain is going crazy as I'm living in the future and thinking about the millionaire that I'm already going to become. I had to find somebody to sell me my first package. One of my best friends from church, Kevin, who lived in another neighborhood that was notorious for selling drugs, found a connect. He gave me his beeper number. He told me to say I wanted to buy an 8-ball. I beeped him. He told me it was going to cost $125. I knew that I had $125 in the house from my candy sales. Boom, let's do it. I was super nervous. I don't know what this transaction is gonna look like. I don't know if I give him the money first. Do I get in his car? The guy pulled up. He looked at me and he was like, what's up? He gave me 5. With that dap was the rocks in his hand. I scooped them up with my hand, dropped them in my pocket, pulled out the money, dapped him up with the money. He didn't say anything else and pulled off. It was one of the scariest 5 seconds of my life. Now I'm trying to figure out, how do I break this rock down? I met my boy Kevin at church and explaining to him this new issue. And he's like, oh yeah, I got you. Kevin reaches in his book bag, pulls out one of his Nintendo cartridges and a razor blade, opens up the white hard rock product, and he begins to chop it up. He's telling me, Marcus, put this piece in a blue bag, put this piece in a black bag, put this piece in a green bag, and that way you'll know which one is the $5 bag, the $10 bag, and the $20 bag. I took those bundles, stuffed them in my pocket, and hit the corner ASAP. Before the end of the night, that entire 8-ball was gone. And now I turned $125 into $300. This life was so much fun. I wake up early in the morning, before school, before my mom go to work. I would climb out of my window. Before my mom wake up, I'm climbing back into my window, acting as if I just woke up and getting ready for school. Then I would go to school all day, come home after basketball practice, and hit the corner. Melanie saw me every night on the corner, giving up dap to these random people every 5 minutes.
I think I kind of knew, but didn't want to accept the fact that Marcus could possibly be selling drugs.
Just the busyness of work and going to school, I had no indication, no sense that he was engaged in selling drugs.
I'm making close to $1,000 as a 13-year-old every week. Having money was awesome. I'll never forget the homecoming dance where I pull out my brand new Versace leather coat that I had just purchased for like $2,700. And my mom is all like, she's excited and they're taking pictures.
I looked at it and I was like, I know I did not purchase this jacket. He must have borrowed it from somebody else.
I wasn't as excited as I once was about going out and hitting the street corner. I wanted to make even more money. One day, I'm having a conversation with one of my friends on the block. He's asking me, do you know how to steal a car? I had no idea how to steal a car. In fact, the thought of stealing a car sounded even scarier than standing outside with a palm full of crack cocaine in your hand. But when my friend was telling me how I could either make $500 a night from selling crack, or I could make $5,000 in 10 minutes stealing cars, this was a no-brainer. I had already been selling crack for a year, and so I was super excited to make even more money stealing cars. My friend told me, Marcus, here are the steps to be able to steal a car. Take your flathead screwdriver, jam it into the upper side of the window. That's how you can flip the screwdriver into the window, pull it out, reach your arm in, and unlock the door. He tells me how a dent puller can be used to be able to take the ignition out of the car. Once you remove the entire ignition out of the car, you can literally just turn the crank with a flathead screwdriver and it will start the car. Then you have to take the car to the chop shop and they would pay me $5,000. They would literally chop up the stolen cars, they strip it for parts and resell them. This process was so much easier than hanging out on the block and selling crack. I'd already known how to drive from taking my mom's car with my sister, and a dent puller was easy to buy. I was excited about this new profession. This was the 90s. Stealing cars around my neighborhood was a very normal thing. In fact, in the back of one of the apartment buildings, there was parking spaces that were just for stolen cars. I'll never forget the very first car that I stole. I'm at the driver's side, I'm trying to jam the window. I finally get it open, I get inside of the car. I'm sitting in the driver's side trying to jam a dent puller that was this long into a slot. After messing up a couple of times, the ignition comes out, stick the flathead screwdriver in there, crank it up, I was gone with the wind. I had just made $5,000 in less than 60 seconds. I knew that I could repeat this process over and over and over again. It was time to become a millionaire. After a couple of months, I'm up to stealing 1 or 2 cars every week. I would spend money on the craziest things, from big bags of weed, to shoes, to clothes, skating ring parties.
Marcus would tell me he stole a car just in case I wanted to use it and needed to go somewhere. I wasn't really concerned about Marcus. I think I wasn't as mature to understand the repercussions behind what he was doing. I knew I wasn't going to tell my mom. I didn't want him to get in any trouble either.
I had so much cash in the house, I opened up a safety deposit box. But I'm still in church, I'm still going to Bible study, I'm making every basketball practice, and my grades were awesome.
The church would always recognize the students that were on the honor roll. I was so proud to see, Melanie and Marcus go up and stand up there with all the other kids.
My mom is proud of me, but if she wasn't on my back, I was trying to figure out a way to make more money. Dwayne was one of my best friends. I was in a math club, he was in a math club. We were both tutors at our school. We were on the same basketball team, and we both wanted to be able to go to the NBA. Dwayne and I were athletic, ambitious teenagers, but after school, we would smoke together. We would talk about basketball, we would talk about girls, or other times we would talk about the next crime that I was going to commit. Dwayne wasn't a part of that lifestyle, but I could tell that he was infatuated with this life. One day, Dwayne was like, hey, I want to learn how to steal a car. And I'm like, I got you. A couple of weeks later, Dwayne came to pick me up. He had a flathead screwdriver in his pocket. It was on. We're smoking weed on the way when I started to see my life in the future. I saw myself graduating from Duke University with an electrical engineering degree, but going on to play for the Chicago Bulls. I believed that stealing cars was just my path to make $1 million to go to college. And I also believed that all of the things that I was doing at church and at school would outweigh this other life that I lived in the shadows. I had no idea how horrible things would become. Dwayne came to pick me up. He had a flathead screwdriver in his pocket. We're driving down the highway, and we end up at the mall in Virginia. There's a gun in our pocket. There's a bunch of people here that were probably affluent. It's the start of December, which is Christmas season. People are going shopping. We could easily steal a car, like one of the nicer cars. Dwayne and I were walking through that mall parking lot. We see a man sleeping in his car. I'm like, Dwayne, we should get him. We tap on the window with the firearm. He wakes up, super startled. We demand that he gets out of the car. I asked him to turn around so that he wouldn't see our face. I pat him down a little bit to see if he had any additional money on him. Dwayne jumped in the driver's side of the car. I literally ran around the back side of the car, jumped in the passenger side, and we were speeding off. We're laughing, we're joking. We're still on the thrill of what just happened when we found the man's credit cards. I'm like, oh snap, why don't we just go shopping on his credit cards? We decided to go to Pentagon City Mall. We're shopping a little bit when one of the attendants at the register asked us whose credit cards we were using. I tell him that it's my dad's credit card and he allowed me to be able to use it. They get on the phone to get a verification. The verification was taking so long that I knew something was up.
I hadn't talked to Marcus all day. He was supposed to come home to get dressed for church. I didn't know where he was.
My palms are sweating, and Dwayne nudged me to tell me that the security guard was looking at me. I look at Dwayne, I'm like, yo, we gotta leave right now. And we end up paying for the clothes. We leave out of the mall, and here comes the security guard, and he yells out, hey, you guys, stop where you going. Yeah, right. We just drop the bags from earlier and just take off. Dwayne and I run 50 laps around the track every day after basketball practice. We're running around, jumping over fences and jumping over trash cans and darting in between buildings. We hear the police sirens. Dwayne and I just kept running. We end up running to some office building. It was the actual Pentagon building. We had no idea that while we were running from the police, that we were running to the police. Now we hear the helicopters. The police close in on us. They jump out of the car, grab me, slam me on the ground, and that's when I knew it was over.
I was at church when I got the call that Marcus was locked up in Virginia, and I'm like, locked up? And then finding out what he had done, credit card fraud and the carjack with a gun. Where did you get a gun from? My head was swimming with so many questions and no answers. I was mad, I was hurt, I was filled with all kinds of emotions. They said to me, well, you can't do anything tonight. You can come tomorrow morning.
As I'm sitting at home watching a football game, there was breaking news that there was carjacking in Virginia. Something in my heart, something in my mind, I knew that it had to be him. My mom came home and she was very upset. That's when she told me that Marcus had been arrested.
I was pleading with the police, just let me go. Finally, they tell me, we need you to write a letter to the victim to let them know that you apologize. And I'm like, this is an easy one. All I gotta do is say I'm sorry and I can go back with my mom. Tell me what you want me to write. In that moment, I wrote a letter to the victim and I apologized for the carjacking that we committed. And then Dwayne, who was in an interrogation room right next to mine, would do the same exact thing.
The next day, we go over to the courthouse to find out exactly, what was going on with Marcus.
In the courtroom, when I saw my mother and my sister, I felt so ashamed. I felt like I let my family down.
I was livid, but I knew he would get a slap on the wrist and that he'd be home, and we would do the punishment at home.
When I had learned that the crime that we had committed carried a life sentence, I said to myself, holy shit, we're really in trouble.
My only son, 15 years of age, he was a part of the basketball team. He was on the honor roll. To have to spend your life incarcerated was just so mind-boggling. Up until that point, he had never had any trouble with the law.
In the 80s and in the early 90s, on the news, they would talk about how these new super predators were coming to their communities and they were terrorizing.
Super predator, predator, predators, super predators.
Kids that once stole hubcaps now rape and murder.
They are not just gangs of kids anymore. No conscience, no empathy.
These were black kids that were labeled as monsters, and they were coming into your neighborhoods and they were causing all of the havoc.
There are no violent offenses that are juvenile.
As a result of this new label, states were just starting to change laws. It gave them the opportunity now to take these black children like Dwayne and I and now charge them as adults. It didn't matter what home they came from or culturally what was going on in their neighborhood or how majority of us were all victimized in our own communities. I never thought in a million years that we would be labeled as a super predator. I struggled to understand that the courts would deem me as an adult. And now I'm facing a life sentence. Clearly, Dwayne and I committed a crime, but we never wanted to hurt anybody. We were teenagers. This is what excitement looked like in our neighborhood. My lawyer, he's explaining to me if I were not willing to take a plea, then they would surely give me a life sentence if I took my case to trial. The police never asked me if I wanted my mom or an attorney present, but they had a confession. I hadn't realized that my signature on that letter signed a potential life sentence at 15 years old. The judge told me very clearly that he would make an example out of us. We have to take a plea.
"8 years, I just couldn't believe that. It was really a lot to take in.
I just ran out of the courtroom. He would not come home until he was an adult. He would be raised by the men in the prison system.
I thought that clearly someone would realize that they had made a mistake and they would let me out. But that wasn't the case for me. I was given inmate number 247384. I wasn't scared because I grew up in a neighborhood where you have to have your head on a swivel. I met Tony because one day he saw me outside dunking on the basketball court.
I was serving 14 years. 4 armed robberies, conspiracy to deliver a controlled substance, and 4 weapon charges.
Tony was also from the DC area, and we would laugh and talk about the old neighborhood.
I felt like the big brother. I felt like it was my duty to kind of like just show him the ropes a little bit. But Marcus never showed fear, and he was very articulate. A lot of guys started gravitating toward him for help. You know, help me write a letter to my family. You know, help me figure out this form so I can go to the store and get commissary.
One day, I realized that I would see people going to purchase commissary and they would always run out of food before the end of the month. I realized that I could go to the commissary and I could purchase 10 honey buns for 45 cents a piece and just hold them. I would hold them until the middle of the month when no one else had food, and I would tell them, I'll give you this honey bun, and all you have to do when we go to the commissary the first of the month is just give me 2 back, and we're all even. After a couple of months, I had hundreds of honey buns. I couldn't even hold it all in my cell.
You're technically not supposed to do it because it is like you know, almost like a loan shark kind of sort of, but you know, what they don't see, they can't catch.
Having a general store out of my Foot Locker allowed me to be able to save cash. and I was able to help support my mom.
I wondered, can you legally do something like this while you're incarcerated? But in all honesty, if it made Marcus feel better, I will support him.
The store allowed me to escape the reality of being in one of the worst places in the world.
I know it was really hard for Marcus to miss a lot of the holidays. I don't think that Marcus was mentally able to handle the sentence.
The only person that I could identify with was Dwayne. But these prisons were filled with hundreds of people. I would only see Dwayne as I'm walking through the hallways. I became angry. I would get sent to solitary confinement because I got in fight after fight. My mom heard this. She told me she was coming to visit me that same weekend. My mom looked me in my eyes and she said, "Marcus, you have lost your mind if you think that I'm letting you go to prison culture. In fact, I'm gonna write you a letter or send you a picture every day for the next 6 years so that you can understand that there's life after prison."
This is not the end. I believe that God has set you down so he can stand you up.
I'm looking at my mom like, so Polaroids or some letters that you're gonna send to me is gonna change anything? My mom looks at me and she's like, "Yeah, all right," and she left. A couple of days later, I got a letter and a photo from my mom from that day forward. The letters will come every day. These photos and these letters saved my life and pulled me out of the deepest, darkest moments of depression, but it would also strengthen my friends as well.
It allows you, again, to connect with the streets and with the society and with his family. So yeah, that also giving you motivation. You know, I'm like, I need to get back there, and I need to be prepared.
Brunswick Correctional Center opened up a new class. It was called Business Computer Software Applications. I needed somewhere that I could go to learn. I needed a place where I could create. And this computer class was that. I knew I didn't want to go home from prison and get back in the drug game. I definitely wasn't going to be stealing any more cars. What could I do after prison? You know, prison can change you. It can change you for the better or for the worse. I was getting ready to get released, but I was petrified.
I didn't think that Marcus would ever be released. I mean, I watched him change over the years. He had grown up in prison. I remember the day that we picked Marcus up from prison like it was yesterday. I stood at the door waiting for him to come, pacing the floor back and forth. And when I first saw him, I immediately just burst into tears.
Incarceration affects the whole family. I felt now that I was free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, I'm free at last. Praise God.
Being released, I had a new set of goals. I wanted to be a businessman. But first, I need to find a job. I would go on job interview after job interview. In each one of them, I had to check the box that said I had been convicted of a felony. It wasn't until the 42nd job application at a paint store that asked the question, have you been convicted of a felony, comma, within the last 7 years? Who, me? Convicted of a felony within the last 7 years? Nope. I hadn't been, and I was able to proudly select no, which gave me my first job. At the paint store, I would hear the customers come in and they would ask, how much do you guys charge to paint my kitchen? We don't paint kitchens. A light bulb went off, and that's when I created Perspectives Painting Contractors. While I was continuing to grow this painting business, Dwayne would come home from prison, and we became business partners. A few months later, my friend Tony would also be released from prison.
When you come home from prison, you feel like the world is already against you. You got like what we call the scarlet letter, you know, the F, felony. I saved up a few dollars in prison. I was able to use the money to run a janitorial and facilities maintenance company.
This new life that we were living was amazing.
Marcus always wanted to bring everybody in, you know, he wanted to have that crowd success as opposed to just that individual success.
Family connectivity in prison is the biggest contributor to success after release. My friends who lived in prison would constantly ask me, dude, can you please send me some pictures? I wanted to contribute to my friends in a way that my mom did for me. I believe that if I could send my friends a text message in prison, then I would share every moment with my friends. I wanted to build a mobile app that will allow users to be able to take a photo from their phone, upload it, type a quick message, and boom, we will print it on a postcard and ship it to any person in any cell, anywhere in the country. Flikshop became known as the Instagram for the incarcerated.
Knowing the value that it offers to keeping families connected, and it gives hope for those persons who are behind bars, I'm thankful.
Guys come home from prison, they don't know how to write a check. They don't even know how to open a bank account. So we created the Flikshop School of Business because we wanted to show people how to structure and run a viable company.
Our ultimate goal at Flikshop is to reduce recidivism by 50% by 2030. My mom is now the relationship manager at Flikshop to ensure that they know that they're not alone.
Marcus says I'm mom in chief. To have Dwayne and Marcus and Tony working together, it's a dream.
To see my little brother's accomplishments has really inspired me to become a better person. I'm extremely proud of my brother.
Today, I sit on the board for the Justice Policy Institute, as well as the advisory board for Princeton University's Prison Teaching Initiative. I'm a top 40 under 40 award recipient from the NAACP. Dwayne is this incredible lawyer, and he's a poet. He's graduated from some of the best schools in the country. This is what restoring humanity can look like when you have support on the other side of these prison walls.